go on ahead.
Just a moment. You see my presentation?
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is San.
And I'm Sunny.
And we'll be presenting on the topic of women in the gaming industry. So we'll start off with an overview on the history and representation of women in the gaming industry, followed by the challenges that women may face, onto the initiatives to push for change, and then conclude with a few notable women who have made it in the gaming industry. So starting off with the overview, a quote by Kate Edwards, the head of the International Game Developers Association. She says that the gaming culture has been pretty misogynistic for a long time now. Throughout our research, we often encountered this topic of sexism, but before we dive into these challenges, here is a quick history overview of women in the gaming industry. So starting off in the early years of 1970s to 1980s, this is when the popularity of the gaming industry emerged, and it was primarily a male-dominated hobby and industry since early video games were often marketed towards men, and a few women were involved due to limitations and societal expectations. On the second, we have 1980s to 1990s, which is the rise of console gaming, with the popularity of the Nintendo Entertainment System leading the market. This is where we see gender stereotypes persist, but despite these challenges, women start to become more involved and enter the community through gaming journalism. Third, we have the 1990s to 2000s, where there's a rise in PCs, the internet, and so there's a rise in PC gaming as well. So with more multiplayer online games, this opens a new avenue for more women gamers and communities. Fourth, we have the 2000s to 2010s, where there is growth with more diversity in representation and in the industry. There's more diverse character roles, narratives, and efforts to promote inclusivity. And finally, we have the 2010s to today, the modern era. Although challenges still exist, the number of women in gaming continually increases. We have notable female game developers, streamers, esports players, and advocacy moments that we'll talk about later. So diving into some of the challenges that women face in this industry, the first one is lack of representation and diversity within the workplace, within the content in video games, and certain stereotypes. So a study in 2020 by the Entertainment Software Association reported that within the United States, 41% of gamers are women, but these numbers do not reflect equally within the industry. Amongst directors, only 6% are women, and amongst developers, only 3% are women. Another study in 2018 by the University of Southern California reported that within video games, only 22.6% of video game protagonists were female. And so within these video games, female characters are usually the secondary characters, portrayed as more submissive, dependent, damsels in distress, wearing realistic clothing or having unrealistic features, and this enforces gender stereotypes.
So another challenge that women face in the gaming industry is harassment and discrimination, both in the workplace and in online gaming communities. And this can include like sexist comments, threats of violence, and much more. Next slide, please. So something we wanted to talk about was the Gamergate movement, because it's a really good example of how women have experienced harassment within the gaming industry. So the Gamergate movement, it was a movement from 2014 to 2015 in the online gaming community. And at first, it was to respond to concerns about the ethics of video game journalism, but it kind of developed into an aggressive online harassment campaign against women in the gaming community. Next slide, please. So some background on this movement, it all started when this guy named Aaron Ganji wrote a post about his relationship with Zoe Quinn, who was an indie game developer. So Ganji basically claimed that Quinn had cheated on him multiple times with other men in the gaming industry in order to gain publicity and reviews for her games. And shortly after Ganji's post, Quinn's address and phone number was leaked, and she began to receive threats of violence and harassment against her. And these threats got so bad that she had to leave her house. And these allegations were later proven false, but it sparked a lot of controversy online. Next slide, please. So the hashtag Gamergate was used to basically target female game developers. And this included like doxing them, threats of violence, and online harassment, not only directed at Quinn, but other women in the gaming industry. And what started as a movement for concerns about the ethics of video games, video game journalism, soon became a hate campaign that targeted not only women, but people of color and other underrepresented groups in the gaming community. And this movement ultimately highlights issues around misogyny and toxic masculinity in the gaming industry, and it sparked awareness about diversity and inclusion in the gaming industry. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then another challenge that they face is objectification and stereotyping. As we discussed previously, the way women are portrayed in video games enforces gender stereotypes, and it's not very empowering towards women. Women are stereotyped and objectified in video games, as well as in the gaming community. And this can lead to like a toxic and unwelcoming environment for women in the industry and for women who are trying to like get into the industry. Next slide. Yeah. And lastly, another challenge that women face, not only in the gaming industry, but in any industry, is unequal pay. But specifically in the gaming industry, according to a 2014 study on pay equality by Gamasutra, there does exist a pay gap between male and female game developers. So for every dollar that a man makes, a woman makes around 86 cents. And this cause of disparity is due to the fact that women are more likely to take breaks from their careers to take care of their families, for example. And this ultimately leads to lesser earnings over time. And we believe that this disparity shouldn't exist when both genders have equal qualifications when it comes to things like education and experience. So this slide shows a survey that was conducted by the International Game Developers Association in 2021. And their survey found that women game developers earn on average $7,000 less per year than their male counterparts. And next slide. So yeah, in summary, again, the challenges that we talked about were a lack of representation, discrimination, stereotyping and objectification, and unequal pay. And all these challenges that we mentioned ultimately create barriers that make it really difficult for women to enter and succeed in the gaming industry. Next slide, please. Yeah, so although women face these challenges in their lives, there has been a lot of effort and initiatives for change. So now we're going to move on and talk about some improvements that are being made to help make the gaming industry more inclusive towards women and other genders. So when it comes to leadership, women are increasingly taking on more leadership roles in the gaming industry. An example can be seen in Riot Games. Women now represent 25% of leadership in their company. And also in 2021, Bonnie Ross was named the new head of Xbox Game Studios, which made her the first woman to lead a major gaming division at Microsoft. And then when it comes to representation, there has been an increase in the number of games featuring female protagonists. For example, games like The Last of Us Part 2 and Horizon Zero Dawn have received recognition from critics for having really strong female protagonists and very inclusive storylines. And yeah, here are a few organizations and initiations that aim to support diversity and inclusion in the gaming industry. And we're going to be going more into details about these 3 different organizations. So the first one is Women in Games International. They're a nonprofit organization that works to support women in the gaming industry. Their mission is to cultivate resources to advance economic equality and diversity in the global games industry. And they provide a lot of resources like networking opportunities, newsletters, workshops, and mentorship programs to women who are interested in entering the field. Next slide, please. Another organization is Dames Making Games. This is a Toronto-based nonprofit organization that provides a supportive community as well as resources for women, non-binary, and gender non-conforming individuals who are interested in game design and development.
And then finally, we have the International Game Developers Association. This was founded in 1994 and is basically a global network of game developers and industry professionals with the mission to support and empower game developers. They provide numerous benefits, starting with community and networking opportunities where developers can just connect with one another through special interest groups and local chapters. The IGDA also provides resources and education. This looks like access to reports or research for game development, as well as hosting workshops and conferences for these developers to enhance their skills. They're also big on advocacy and engage with policymakers and stakeholders to improve DEI efforts. And they're a hub for career development and support through mentorship programs, job boards, and pushing for ethical industry standards and practices. There has also been numerous companies, one including Intel. They have invested $300 million towards female diversity in the gaming industry and are committed to doubling the number of women working as developers in the next decade. And now we'll move on to mentioning a few notable women who have made it. So starting off, we have first Brenda Romero. She is currently she was the co-founder of the International Game Developers Association I just mentioned, and she has been a game designer and developer for over 30 years. One of her most notable works is the Train series, which consists of 3 games that tackle heavy subjects like the Holocaust and game design ethics, and she's noted for her storytelling as well as innovative, thought-provoking designs. She's also the co-founder of 2 development studios, Loot Droop and Romero Games. Second, we have Jane Raymond. She is a video game producer and executive, most known for her work on Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs. She is also a founder of 2 development studios, and she is a vocal advocate and encourages for more women to enter the industry. She quotes that in order to make games that speak to people, it is relevant that you have a broader set of people working on these games. Lastly, we wanted to mention Bonnie Ross. She's worked for Microsoft since 1994 and is now the head of 343 Industries, which is a game development studio that she played a key role in the creation and success of the Halo franchise, a first-person shooter game. She's also another vocal advocate for diversity and inclusivity in the gaming industry. So in conclusion, we covered a lot today about women in the gaming industry, from the statistics and challenges women may face to the initiatives for change that have allowed many women to succeed. So here is a quote from Bonnie Ross, and she shares the importance of diversity within this field. I believe that the diversity and inclusivity of gaming is what makes it such a powerful medium. It has the ability to bring people from all walks of life together and create shared experiences that can be truly transformative. So what are the next steps? While the gaming industry has become a lot more inviting, it is important that we are aware of these challenges that have existed and still exist today. So to ensure that this industry remains innovative and welcoming to everyone, here are some next steps that we can all take. We must continue to educate ourselves, address issues if they arise, if we see them, and we can take the additional step of attending these supportive events or joining the many organizations that we mentioned previously. And although there were a lot of challenges that we walked through today, we also want to emphasize that there are more and more narratives of women who no longer experience these issues. And most importantly, no one should ever be discouraged from pursuing a career in this field. So with that, we hope that this presentation gave you more insight, and thank you so much for listening. Here are our references.
That was fast. Can you leave that slide up again? The references slide, if you don't mind. Nice. Okay, I think we have time for a few questions. Does the audience have questions? I saw there was some very helpful stuff popping up in the discussion. I know you talked about this. I'm gonna ask this in sort of the broadest sort of way. Why do we care? I mean, and I don't want this to be like, I mean, I want you to understand that I fully agree with, and this is an important subject. I'm just wondering if there's if you have a way of sort of phrasing it or talking about why everyone should care about the number of women that are making games.
I think it's important for women to make games. So games are more diverse. I feel like when maybe sometimes when only men make games, they kind of feel the same. And I feel like women aren't represented properly when games are made by men. And also the way that women are portrayed in video games can be changed for the better.
There's a saying in the disability community, not about us without us. And I think that feels really relevant here. If you're talking about making something that is trying to reflect on human activity, there are going to be women there, right? If not, I mean, what the hell? What's going on, right? And if you're making something that has women in it, I think you need to make sure that you're reflecting an accurate assessment of lives and interactions. Let's see here. Do we have other questions from the audience? Yes, Christopher.
Yeah, I mean, you said a key phrase that I think is really important to pay a note of. And I want somebody to come up with an equivalent, if you can think of one. And that phrase is damsel in distress. You know, I don't know of a male equivalent, which just shows more prevalent sexism in the gaming industry, that, you know, there's a trope of women need saving. There's a trope of that they're fragile or volatile or whatever, but it's not true. And I think, you know, with the examples of the lead female roles that you have of characters, I think it's really important to note that, you know, there's a need to eliminate those old phrases. There's a need to eliminate those almost like theatrical expectations, because when we see them present in a game, we're just kind of like, okay, here's the damsel in distress. Like, we already have a preconceived idea of what that concept is, looks, and sounds like, and that needs to be done with. Or we need to create new ones where it's like, you know, it encompasses every aspect of potential characters instead of just specific characters.